are at stage 9, paragraph page 711. Okay, and our last headword was verb and infinitive or ing, newer type of lesson. Okay, so
Yes.
let's start with our revision. Okay, let me just scroll down.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. First question. If a friend of yours wants to go to one cinema and you want to go to another and you can't agree about which to go to, what do you do? If a friend of yours wants to go to one cinema and you want to go to another and you can't agree about which to go to, what do you do? If a friend of mine
If a friend of
wants to
mine
go
wants to
to one
go
cinema
to one
and I
cinema
want to go
and
to
I want to
another
go to
and we
another
can't agree
and we
about
can't
which
agree
to go to,
about which to go
we
to, we watch different cinemas.
very good. Do you agree that life was better in the past than it is today? Do you agree that life was better in the past than it is today? Yes or no?
No,
I don't agree
I don't
that
agree
life was
that
better
life
in the
was
past
better in the
than
past
it is today.
it is today.
Wait, would you agree to do an extra 3 hours of English today? Would you agree to do an extra 3 hours of English today? Yes or no?
No,
I wouldn't agree
I wouldn't
to
agree
do an
to do
extra three
an
hours
extra
of
3 hours
English
of
today.
English today.
Would you agree to a plan that might get you into trouble with the police? Would you agree to a plan that might get you into trouble with the police? Yes or no?
No,
I wouldn't agree
I wouldn't
to a
agree
plan
to
that
a
might
plan
get me
that
into
might get
trouble
me into
with the
trouble
police.
with the police.
When you don't agree with other people, what do you do? When you don't agree with other people, what do you do? When I don't agree
When I don't
with other
agree
people,
with other people,
I
I discuss with them again.
very good. What do you think ought to be done with drivers who don't take care whilst driving and consequently run people over? What do you think ought to be done with drivers who don't take care whilst driving and consequently run people over? I think that
I
drivers
think I think that
who
drivers
don't take care
who don't take
whilst
care
driving
while
and
driving
consequently
and
run
consequently
people over
run people
ought to
over
be arrested.
ought to be arrested.
Very good. When you were a child, who took care of you when you were ill? When you were a child, who took care of you when you were ill? When I was a child,
When I was a child,
my
my
took
parents
care of me
took care of
when I
me
was ill.
when I was ill.
Very good. If you went for dinner at a friend's house but didn't care much for the food, would you still tell them it was good? If you went for dinner at a friend's house but didn't care much for the food, would you still tell them it was good? Yes or no?
Yes,
If I went for
if I
dinner
went
at a
for
friend's
dinner
house
at a friend's
but didn't
house
care much
but
for the
didn't care
food,
much for the
I'd still
food,
tell them
I
it
still
was
tell
good.
them it was good.
Very good. What does the expression I dare say you're right mean? What does the expression I dare say you're right mean? The expression
The
I dare
expression
say
I
you're
dare
right
say
means
you're
I
right
think
means
you're probably
I
right.
think you're probably right.
What kind of jobs would you say require the most daring? What kind of jobs would you say require the most daring? I'd say the
I'd
kind of
say
jobs
the kind of
which
jobs
required the
which
most
require
daring would
the
be
most daring would be rescue, uh,
soldier,
soldier,
etc.
etc.
Very good. In dry countries, do people try to conserve water as much as possible? In dry countries, do people try to conserve water as much as possible? Yes. In dry
Yes,
countries,
in dry
people try
countries,
to conserve
people
water
try to
as
conserve
much as
water
possible.
as much as possible.
Very good. When you eventually finish studying English, do you think you'll be eager to start learning another language immediately? When you eventually finish studying English, do you think you'll be eager to start learning another language immediately? Yes or no?
Yes,
When I eventually
when I
finish
eventually
studying
finish
English,
studying
I
English,
think I'll be
I
eager
think I'll
to
be
start
eager
learning another
to start
language
learning another
immediately.
language
Immediately.
immediately.
Very good. Why do we rub our hands together in cold weather? Why do we rub our hands together in cold weather? We rub our hands
We rub our
together
hands
in cold weather
in cold weather
because it makes them
because
warmer.
it makes them warmer.
Very good. How can we rub out a pencil mark on a piece of paper? How can we rub out a pencil mark on a piece of paper? We can rub out
We
a
can rub
pencil
out
mark
a
on a
pencil
piece of
mark
paper
on a
by
piece of
using a
paper
rubber.
by using a rubber.
Very good. Where does your window face onto? Where does your window face onto? My window
My window
faces onto the.
faces onto the street.
Very good. If you found yourself face to face with a killer with a knife in his hand, what did you do? If you found yourself face to face with a killer with a knife in his hand, what did you do? If I found
If
myself
I found
face to
myself
face with a
face
killer
to face with a
with a
killer
knife in his
with a
hand,
knife in his hand,
I'd.
I'd run away.
Very good. Do all religions in the world have a God? Do all religions in the world have a God? No, not all
No, not
religions in
all
the world
religions in the
have a
world
God.
have a God.
Very good. What can the word thus mean? What can the word thus mean? The word thus
The
can
word
mean
thus
therefore
can mean
or
therefore
in this way.
or in this way.
Give me an example of each. Give me an example of each, please. He is ill and
He is
thus
ill
will not
and
be
thus
able
will not be
to attend
able
the meeting.
to attend the
The
meeting.
mother cut the
The mother
sandwich into small
cut,
pieces,
cut the sandwich
into small pieces,
into small pieces,
thus making it
thus
easier
making it
for her
easier
young son to eat.
for her young son to eat.
Very good. If the cost of living suddenly rose and you needed to economize, what changes would you make in your life? If the cost of living suddenly rose and you needed to economize, what changes would you make in your life? If the cost of living
If the cost of
suddenly
living
rose
suddenly
and I
rose
needed to
and I
economize,
needed to
I'd.
economize, I'd reduce playing golf.
Very good. Okay. Does my job involve correcting your mistakes? Does my job involve correcting your mistakes? Yes. Your job
Yes, your
involves
job involves
correcting my mistakes.
correcting my
Well,
mistakes.
have you ever been involved in organizing a surprise party for a friend or family member? Have you ever been involved in organizing a surprise party for a friend or family member? Yes or no?
No,
I've never been
I
involved
never been
in
involved
organizing
in
a surprise
organizing
party
a surprise
for a
party
friend or
for a
family
friend
member.
or family member.
Where do innocent people ever get attacked in the streets of your hometown? Do innocent people ever get attacked in the streets of your hometown? Yes or no?
No,
Innocent people
innocent
never
people
get attacked
never get
in this
attacked
in the
in
street
this in the
in my
street
hometown.
in my hometown.
Where what's another word for hardly? What's another word for hardly? Another word for
Another
hardly
word for
is
hardly
scarcely.
is scarcely.
Give me an example. Give me an example, please. He scarcely knew
Is
anyone
scarcely
at the
new.
party.
Knew
Anyone at the party.
anyone at the
So
party.
he went home early.
So he went home early.
Very good. What do I mean if I say that I have scarcely any money? What do I mean if I say that I have scarcely any money? If you say
If
that
you
you
say
have scarcely
that you have
any money,
scarcely any
you
money,
mean that you
you
have
mean that
almost no
you
money.
have almost no money.
Very good. Why does food become scarce in wartime? Why does food become scarce in wartime? Food becomes
Food
scarce in
becomes
wartime
scarce in
because
wartime
there aren't
because
enough
there
people
aren't enough
to
people
work on the
to
farms
work on
or on the
on the
farms
on the farms
or in the factories.
or in the factory.
Very good. Do you think it's fair to judge people on first impressions? Do you think it's fair to judge people on first impressions? Yes or no?
No,
I don't think it's
I
fair
don't think
to
it's
judge
fair
people
to judge
on first
people
impressions.
on first impression.
Where if you held a dinner party and served food that had been cooked in a microwave, would it make a good impression on your guests? If you held a dinner party and served food that had been cooked in a microwave, would it make a good impression on your guests? No. If I
No,
held
if
a
I
dinner
had
party
a dinner
and served
party
food
and served
that
food
had been cooked
that had been
in a
cooked
microwave,
in a
it wouldn't
microwave,
make a good
it will
impression
not make It
A good
it
impression
a good
on my
impression
guest.
on my guest.
Very good. What does a dog do with a bone? What does a dog do with a bone? A dog buries a
A
bone.
dog buries
A
the
bone
bone,
in the
a
ground.
bone in the ground.
What is a cemetery? What is a cemetery? A cemetery
A
is a
cemetery
place where
is a
people
place
are buried
where people are
when they
buried
die.
when they die.
Very good. What angers you more than anything else? What angers you more than anything else?
Uh, uh, hungry,
Hunger angers
hunger,
me.
hunger,
Angers me
hunger angers
more
me
than anything else.
more than anything else.
Does it anger you when an airline makes an additional charge for luggage? Does it anger you when an airline makes an additional charge for luggage? Yes or no?
No,
It doesn't anger
it
me
doesn't anger
when
me
an airline
when an
makes
airline
an additional charge
makes an additional
for
charge
luggage.
for luggage.
What do you think is the best way to insult a person? What do you think is the best way to insult a person? I think the best
I
way
think
to
the best
insult
way
a person
to insult a
is
person
to
is to
say bad things about him.
say bad thing about him.
Right? If a foreign person said something negative about your country, would you consider it an insult? If a foreign person said something negative to you about your country, would you take it as an insult? Yes or no?
Yes,
If a foreign person
if a foreign
said
person
something negative
said
to me
something negative to
about my
me
country,
about my
I'd
country,
consider it an
I
insult.
consider insult.
I'd consider it an insult.
I consider to get insult.
I consider it an insult.
I consider if
It,
it.
it an
I
insult.
consider it
An insult.
an insult.
Very good. What does the idiom for heaven's sake mean? What does the idiom for heaven's sake mean? The idiom
The
for
idiom
heaven's sake
for heaven's sake
means a
means
very strong form
a very strong
of
form
please.
of praise.
Give me an example. Give me an example, please. For heaven's sake.
For heaven's
Don't do
sake,
that again,
don't do that
or I'll
again,
be very angry.
or I'll be very angry.
Very good. In English, if a verb is followed immediately by another verb, what form must the second verb be? In English, if a verb is followed immediately by another verb, what form must the second verb be? In English,
In
if a
English,
verb is
if
followed
a verb
immediately
is followed
by another
immediately
verb,
by another
the
verb,
second verb
the
must be
second verb
either
must
an
be
infinitive,
either
an infinitive,
infinitive
or a gerund.
or a gerund.
Tell me some verbs that are followed by an infinitive. Tell me some verbs that are followed by an infinitive, please. Some verbs
Some
that are
verbs
followed
that are
by an
followed
infinitive
by
are
an infinitive are
ask, agree,
ask,
refuse,
agree,
and manage.
refuse, and
Tell
manage.
me some verbs that are followed by a gerund. Tell me some verbs that are followed by a gerund, please. Some verbs
Some
that are
verbs
followed
that are
by a
followed
gerund are
by a gerund are
deny, avoid,
deny,
practice,
avoid,
and miss.
practice, and
Well,
miss.
if a verb is the verb promise followed by an infinitive or a gerund, is the verb promise followed by an infinitive or a gerund? The verb promise
The verb
is
promise
followed by
is
an
followed
infinitive.
by an infinitive.
Give me an example. Give me an example, please. He promised to
He
try
promised
harder next
to
time.
try harder
Next time.
next time.
Is the verb consider followed by an infinitive or a gerund? Is the verb consider followed by an infinitive or a gerund? The verb consider
The verb
is
consider
followed by a
is followed
gerund.
by a gerund.
Give me an example. Give me an example, please. You should consider
You should
buying a new
consider
car.
buying new car.
Very good. Okay, and that's the end of our revision. Let's have new word. Okay, repeat. Afraid of.
Afraid of.
Afraid that.
Ain't
Afraid.
that.
Afraid that.
Afraid that.
Afraid to.
Afraid to
Crash.
crash.
Very good. Okay, listen. Afraid of is usually followed by a noun or a gerund. For example, she's afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of seeing ghosts. Afraid that is usually followed by a clause. For example, I'm afraid that I'm going to lose my job. I'm afraid that she'll leave me. Afraid to is usually followed by a verb. For example, I'm afraid to swim in the middle of the sea. I'm afraid to walk in the streets at night. The word crash can be a verb and a noun. Crash as a verb means to have an accident in a car, plane, etc. For example, my car crashed into another car. Crash as a noun means an accident involving a vehicle, usually a serious one in which the vehicle is damaged or someone is hurt. For example, a train crash, a plane crash, etc. Let's practice. What do you suppose some people, especially children, are afraid of the dark? Why do you suppose some people, especially children, are afraid of the dark? I suppose some
I
people,
suppose some
especially
people,
children,
especially
are
children,
afraid of the dark,
are afraid
of the dark,
of the dark
because they imagine
because they
things,
imagine
things that are not there.
things that are not there.
Wicked, why are some people more afraid that they might get killed if they travel by plane than by other means of transport? Why are some people more afraid that they might get killed if they travel by plane than by other means of transport? Some people are
Some
more
people
afraid
are more
that they
afraid
might get killed
that they might get
if
killed
they travel by
if
plane
they travel by
than
plane,
by other means
some by other
of
means
transport because
of transport
a plane crash because a plane crash
because a plane
is
crash
front page news.
is front page of news.
Very good. Okay, next listen. We can also use afraid for an apology. For example, a shopkeeper might say to a customer, I'm afraid we haven't got the size you want, sir, instead of saying I'm sorry. Let's practice. Give me an example of the word afraid used in an apology. Give me an example of the word afraid used in an apology, please. I'm afraid. I
I'm
can't
afraid
help you.
I can't help you.
Very good. Next, repeat whiskers.
Whiskers,
Gap.
gap,
Fence. Uh,
hence,
fence with the F. Fence.
fence, fence,
Hedge.
hedge,
Very good. Okay, listen, gap is a noun. For example, there's a gap between my fingers, like a space gap. There's a gap between me and the wall. Fence is a noun. For example, we put a fence around the garden of our yard to keep animals from entering. Fences are usually made of wood. Hedge is a noun. It is a row of small trees or plants that are planted close to each other that shows where an area ends and another area begins. Whiskers is a noun. It means the long, stiff hair growing on the face of a cat, mouse, or other mammals. A cat's whiskers are more or less the same width as its body. This means that when it goes hunting for mice and birds, it can use its whiskers to measure the width of a gap in a fence or a hedge to see if it is possible to get through the gap without using force and making a lot of noise. Let's practice. For what purpose does a cat use its whiskers? For what purpose does a cat use its whiskers? A cat uses its
a cat
whiskers
uses
to
its
measure the
use
width,
its whiskers
to measure the width,
to make sure the wish
to measure the width
to measure the wish
of a gap
of a gap
in a fence
in a
or a
fence
hedge
or a
to
hedge
see if it
to
is
see
possible
if it's
to
possible
get through the gap
to get through the gap
without using force
without using
and
force
making a lot of noise.
and making a lot of noise.
Greg, do you think it's a good idea for students to have a gap year between finishing school and starting university? Do you think it's a good idea for students to have a gap year between finishing school and starting university? Yes or no?
No,
I don't think
I don't
it's a
think
good idea
it's a good
for
idea
students to
for
have a
students
gap
to
year
have a gap here
between finishing school
between finishing
and
school
starting university.
and starting university
Why? Why do you think so? Because?
Because student uh,
Because students should
start to run at the same level
same level and continuously. Okay, very good.
continuously.
Do we have to mind the gap between the train and the edge of the platform at some stations? Do we have to mind the gap between the train and the edge of platforms at some stations? Yes, we have to
Yes,
mind the gap
we have to mind the gap
between train
between
and the
train
edge of the
and the
platform
edge of the
at some
platform
stations.
at some stations.
Very good. Okay, so now let's move on to reading. Okay, reading is at stage 7, paragraph page 559. Last headword was take back. Okay, please start at page 560. Second question. Have you got any brothers or sisters?
Okay. Have you got any brothers or sisters? Yes, I've got a brother.
Mhm.
Do their clothes fit you? Yes, their clothes fit me. Why or why not?
Well, why?
Why?
Because they take.
Because they take the same size as me.
Very good.
Are you fit to teach English? Maybe I'm fit to teach beginner level English. What do we mean if we say someone's fit for nothing? If we say someone's
Someone's.
fit for nothing, we mean that they are not good enough to do anything. What's the best way to keep fit? The best way to keep fit is to do physical exercise 2 or 3 times a week. What does the idiom to feel down mean? The idiom to feel down means to feel unhappy. Give me an example, please. I was feeling very down. I was feeling very down that morning, but I felt much better when her letter arrived. Identify,
Mhm.
identity. How would you be able to identify yourself in the street if you were stopped by the police? I'd be able to identify myself in the street if I was stopped by the police by showing them my identity card, passport, etc.
Mhm.
So that do you think it's possible for foreigners to learn English so well that people would think they were English? Yes, I think it's possible for foreigners to learn English so well that people would think they were English, but it happens very rarely. It often depends on whether their own language is similar to English. What do you do in the evening when it's so cold that it'd be unpleasant to go out? In the evening when it's so cold that it'd be unpleasant to go out,
I.
I'd stay home.
Mhm.
Gather, crew. Do I gather up my things from the table at the end of the lesson? Yes, you can. You gather up your things from the table at the end of the lesson. At what time? At what time of the year do farmers gather the fruits in this part of the world? Farmers gather the fruit in this part of the
In
world.
what? In what season?
In, oh,
In Mummer.
farmers gather the fruits in autumn
Hmm.
in this part of the world.
Very good.
When a man has been murdered, How do the police gather information about the murder?
Okay, very good. So we stop there for today, but very good reading, very good dictation, and